Hello and welcome to the DRF Clocker Report webinar. This is Mike Hogan, the Director of Product Marketing here at Daily Racing Forum, and I'm joined, it's my pleasure to be joined by Mr. Mike Welsch, the head clocker for DRF, who's calling in from Saratoga today. Welcome, Mike.
Good morning.
So we want to just quickly cover, we're gonna have a nice quick webinar here. It's going to be about a half hour total. We want to just talk about why even use a clocker report at all in your handicapping, and how you can, which particular types of races to focus on, and how it can augment your other kind of more traditional handicapping approaches. And then we're also going to dive into reviewing today's actual clocker report for the Saratoga card. And then we're going to end with some questions and answers from all of you listening out there. So what you'll do is, if you have any questions throughout the broadcast, in the right portion of your screen, the webinar chat window, you just type them in, click send. They'll come through to Charlie Zeggers, who's running the broadcast, and he'll either ask them at the end, or if we're covering a particular race that it makes sense to jump into, he'll jump in and ask those questions. And then also of note, under the webinar panel on the right side of the screen, you'll see that there's a handout there. If you click that, you can download the PDF for today's card. You can either follow along as we're going, or you can watch what we're doing through my screen. So with that, let's jump through. I'm going to change over from the PowerPoint and show the actual clocker report for today. And Mike, this is perhaps the first time that a lot of these folks are looking at the clocker report. Do you want to give a little bit of an intro about how to read it and why you'd want to read it, and the types of things to look for when you're first looking at a clocker report?
Yeah, I mean, I think the benefit of the clocker report is that it kind of brings to life those little times that you see on the bottom of, that we've been traditionally using. You could see the times, and they all have little B's and H's, but really be nothing, because the actual track clockers really only assign those more or less on the times themselves, and don't really put the time into That's the best way to use this thing. You look for those either extra special or not so good reports, and that becomes a big factor in your handicapping.
Yeah, one of the things I love about using the clocker report is not just the grades and the descriptions, but also you'll see here it'll mention who the horse is working in company with, and many times it'll mention if there's a name rider, a known jockey in the morning workout, which is really crucial, because if, say, Javier Castellano is working the horse in the morning and then riding in the afternoon, and it's not a stakes winner or a stakes type horse, if that's a maiden or even a horse making their debut, that's huge extra information that you wouldn't get elsewhere. So that's one of the things I love to look for.
Yeah, we've tried to upgrade that. Before, we used to just put the workmate's name in, and now we're kind of adding on what kind of horse that workmate is. With the 2-year-olds, you get a lot of just unraced maidens, but sometimes they work against older horses and hold their own, and that's right there is a telling point. And yeah, the riders themselves, and we can kind of get an, sometimes so many horses are working at the same time, you can't don't have time to kind of look down and see which rider it is. But some we could tell just by the helmets they wear and the jackets they wear, and we put that in when we can do it. And yeah, I agree with you. That's a big help to see if these riders are thick enough for these horses to come out in the morning to get on them, especially the babies. And then they ride them back in the afternoon. Sometimes they get caught in situations where they work the horse in the morning and then they're named on somebody else that they've already given a call to, or you work one for trainer B and Todd Fletcher gives you a call. You're going to ride the Todd Fletcher horse more often than not. But Johnny and Javier sometimes exchange who they'll work horses in the morning for Todd and then maybe ride another one in there. But we try to do that as best we can. And like I said, now we're trying to give you an idea not only who the workmate is, but what kind of horse they are too.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, I remember last week there was a maiden for Bill Mott that was working in morning in company with Lee, and that's the sort of thing that you would never know unless you were looking at the Clocker Report. I think it was coming off a relatively long layoff and ran a pretty good third, going 9 furlongs off of probably an 8 or 9 month layoff.
That was
that's
also
the kind of thing.
Rise.
Yeah.
We had a lot of good works on that horse this winter at Gulfstream Park. If you go back on the work. Sometimes we try to go back as 4 or 5 works on them, and I wish he had Lasix last week. I think that might have been and one race under his belt. I think he would have won that race. But the one thing I do try to point out to people, though, when you do use this report, I mean, we put the grades in there, but you have to read the comments because the grades are a little bit subjective sometimes. Sometimes B's could be, maybe a B plus or a B plus, maybe could be an A minus. You're kind of on the fence, and but if you read the comment, I think you can get a feeling of how we really feel about the work. So sometimes, a B work may be a little better than it looks, or maybe not quite as good as it looks. But you just can't look at the grades and say, well, I'm going to bet every B plus or A minus and throw out every C minus and D. I think you really need to, especially on the better works, you really need to read between the lines a little bit.
Yeah, and wouldn't it be fair to say too that sometimes it depends on what the trainer is looking to get out of the work? And I've seen ones where the horse has had a couple B plus works and then comes in with a most recent work that might be more like a C plus, and I wouldn't worry too much about something like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I wouldn't worry about something like that too much because often the race or the work prior to the race is just a maintenance work and they're not looking to get the most out of it, especially if some of the other works leading into it have been much better.
Right. I mean, you can't give a 51 and change half mile a big grade, but if it looks like a maintenance work and we get to feel that it's a maintenance work, we'll put that in, give it a C plus or B minus, and again, you read and not look at the grade itself and see it's a maintenance work, and all they wanted to do is stretch his legs and get him around there. Yeah, Steve Asmussen does that a lot 5 days out before the races. The horse will have a big work time before, and they'll come back with a C plus, B minus, kind of easy half mile, and I just wouldn't worry about that. If you have a grade that doesn't look great on top of a race, if they have good works prior to that, then I think that says enough right there.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, let's take a look at the actual report. We're showing it on the screen. I know we have fortunate enough to schedule this on the morning of a big Pick 6 carryover, so I'm sure a lot of the listeners, callers are interested in that. We wanted to focus on race 7, which is I believe the first maiden race in the sequence, in the Pick 6 sequence. Mike, are there any works there in that race? I know the maiden races are a good place to focus on the work report because there's often not a lot of races to go from, and other than the works, you either go by breeding or trainer and jockey. But the works can really help paint that picture, and a lot of times, especially if horses are working in company, these work notes are almost like little mini races, aren't they?
Yeah, no. I mean, like I said, I think you really need to read the comments too, and just don't look at the grades. In this race, there's several first-time starters in here, and they're all pretty good. I mean, there's no one that really stands out. There's no one with blazing speed, but and these are 3-year-olds, not 2-year-olds, so they will tend, maybe more often than not, you'll have more of them tend to be working better just because they're older and a little more, they've been around the block a little bit more in the morning as well. But, starting from the rail, excuse my French, and I think a good example of reading the comment, I mean, he only got a grade at B because the time was 49 and change, 103 and 1. But you read the comment that Mike put on this one was hard hells with her ears pricked and a nice move. You know, that's pretty encouraging. And then I had her the week before from the gate working, you know, faster where the intention was to work a little faster, and then Javier Castellano aboard that morning. Now you get Javier back in the afternoon. Now, a horse like this, though, the one caveat is breaking from the rail. You just don't know.
Right.
It's really not where you prefer a first-time starter to be. So you got to factor that into your handicapping, I suppose. You just can't predict. Some of these horses will break fine, and some of them won't. In the morning, you know, when they break from the gate, we do kind of put in the comments if a horse breaks slow from the gate. You know, the baby the other day of Todd Fletcher's that wound up winning at 4-5. I had put her last work. She had broken a step or two slow, and then she, you know, galloped out, finished well and galloped out well, and that's exactly what she did in the race the other day, and she was good enough to overcome that. But if you see a note on a first-time starter that says they've been breaking the step or two slow in the morning, especially if they were to draw the rail, I think that would be a little bit of a red flag there. But, you know, we'll go on now, vacation spot.
Sure.
Most of her works have been, you know, in relative anonymity at the Churchill Downs Training Center. And that, you know, that's the one problem. In a perfect world here, we would have clockers for the form, you know, everywhere, and we don't.
Right.
And even the tracks don't really have their own clocker at some of these training centers. So you sometimes have to take these training center works with a grain of salt. There's no one there to report them. There's not even official track clockers there. I mean, this horse was getting some fast times even at the training center. And she was very fast here, too. I mean, this horse is kind of a wild card in this race. We only saw her the one time. She was fast. She didn't gallop out. I think that was more by design because that's just Mike Maker's style. And sometimes we'll put that, too. If a horse doesn't gallop out and we notice that that's a trend with different barns, we'll put that in there, too. So, you know, I gave her a B. If she had galloped out, you know, at all, I probably would have given this work a B+, but she didn't, so I kind of downgraded a little for that. But I think she's a horse that you have to respect in this race. Bird Sense is going to be one of the favorites because of the experience that she's had. But I have her under extreme late pressure, so the time was fast in her last move, but she was hard asked to do so. So, you know, she might be vulnerable in here. She's already been, you know, beaten several times. Sanctifica is a horse that I know Mike liked a lot, sort of the other clockers at Belmont prior to her last race, and we were all kind of shocked she got beat. So we haven't seen her working since then, since we haven't had anybody there at Belmont after the middle of July. You know, and that's the problem here. There's only two of us. We can only be at, you know, so many places at one time. And one, you know, after a while, we just both came up here. I actually went in the Belmont for a week, and Mike came up here early, and then now we're both up here. So we just don't have works on these horses, you know, that are staying behind at Belmont. Unfortunately, like I said, in a perfect world, we would have that, but at this point, we still don't. So you have to go by what we've seen in her before, and I think she's a definite player in this race. And an interesting horse is Taraha. I only saw the last two times. The July 12th work was just average, but Mike had her pretty good before that at Belmont. And in her last work, I, you know, kind of wrote it was sneaky good. I mean, the time was 48-4. It's not the fastest, you know, gate work you're going to have, but it looked to me like they just wanted to get her some experience getting out of the gate, and then they just took her in hand, and she was almost eased up, as I wrote. So she could have gone faster. So I think this filly also is a horse to reckon with. So, you know, it's a confusing race a little bit. I mean, the workout report is going to give you an indication that some of these first-time starters are good enough to win the race. And if you're playing pick sixes, you know, you may have to use them all. But that's the problem here. Even as a clocker, I mean, I can't tell you who's going to win this race. You know, all I can tell you is who's been doing well. And, you know, as a gambler or horse player, you're going to have to make the rest of the decisions yourself.
Yeah, it's an absolutely wide open race that I think you can go a lot of different ways, and you know, I'll mention too that Istaraha is a full sister to Tapazar, so Certainly the blood is there, and if she's ready to run first out, she could be maybe a little overlooked with. I mean, I think you're right. Bird Sense is going to be one of the favorites, especially folks are going to see Carolina in her running lines a couple back.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, she certainly got bet next out off of that race. So fantastic. I know we've got another really interesting race with some returnees coming off of relatively long layoffs. I'm talking about the 9th race. Is there anything you want to talk about in there? There was actually the shine again. It was one that jumped out at me a little bit, and that was the Works for Birdmaker.
Yeah, I mean, actually, both of Ian's horses are working pretty well in this race, and I actually thought that maybe Take the Odds last work was even a little better than Birdmaker. This is an absolutely impossible race. Sweet Basil's been training well. Wayville. I wish we had someone down there that could absolutely say she's training like those times look on paper, but who knows? I mean, if you had someone there and they're looking at those bullets, maybe she was hard used and got tired and didn't gallop out, and she'd be someone you'd want to throw out. We certainly have seen a lot of that before in our workout report, but in this particular case, nobody there, so we're just going to have to kind of guess, what's going to happen with her in that race. And,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, certainly from a handicapping standpoint, it's sort of an odd place for her to return off of this long layoff, especially considering she was cross-entered, and now she shows up here going 7 furlongs, which might be a little tough off the bench because it hasn't really seemed to be her best distance, and with some of those question marks in there, and certainly some other, like you said, a very tough field to come back and win first off the bench, going an extra furlong longer than where she's had her most recent success. She's one I don't know if I'd want to lean too heavily on it at a short price.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. And you go back one race to the 8th race too, and you've got horses coming off layoffs. You got horses trying to turf for the first time. A couple of them who are doing well, like Cash Control and La Madrina. La Madrina's looked terrific on the grass.
Yeah.
Cash Control, I only saw the one time, and galloped out extremely well. And Brad Cox has come in here and done well already. Holiday Jewel seems to be, a major player in here. We haven't seen her. Chrysalis for Chris Clement looks like the class of the field, and the work I saw on July 12th was excellent. So you got to respect her. So again, I mean, these races in this sequence, like I said, all we can do is tell you how they're doing. We can't, we don't try to predict from a clocker standpoint who's going to win these races, but I think some of this information will point some people in the right direction anyway. Hopefully a lot of people that buy the report.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and if you see a work like this for Chrysalis, who's making her debut in North America, and then you also you either use Formulator or even just look at Christoph's stats with these foreign shippers. Those two things together might make you feel a little more comfortable about using that one as an A or leaning pretty heavily in the multis on a horse like that. Whereas on the flip side, if the work wasn't terribly good coming in, you might be more inclined to give the horse a race.
Right. No, exactly. I mean, again, we're only part of the puzzle here with this workout report, but look, in this game, you're only right a third of the time. I think our reports help that percentage a little bit. We've had a lot of horses work good and not run well, and some horses not work well and win, but I think our percentage is pretty good with the higher rated horses, especially. and sometimes you can get a sneaky good price on these things by using this report, where you get that little extra advantage and a little extra insight into some of these works instead of just using the raw times like I said before.
Yeah. I like it. All right, well, we have a few more minutes, and I want to make sure we use that time to get to questions. Charlie, do we have any questions from anybody that's come through so far yet?
Yeah, there's a few. One of these is a pretty easy one. What tracks do you cover in the Clocker Report?
We've got clockers right now here at just Saratoga. Mike's at Belmont. Mike Vesey, my partner, who's a terrific clocker. He's as good a clocker as I've seen around, to tell you the truth, and we're really lucky to have him. He's at Belmont from the spring until he comes to Saratoga, and then both of us, Mike will remain in New York afterwards. We will have a Belmont report with a lot of spillover, obviously, early in the meet from the stuff we both see here. He'll stay behind in New York. I'm going to head to Florida. We do Florida in the winter. We do Gulfstream Park. I'm at Gulfstream. Mike's at Palmettos. We also have a third clocker that we use down in Florida. He's at Palm Beach Downs, where the Todd Fletcher and the George Weaver horses train, and that's a new addition for last year. We had him for the first time, and that was a big plus too. So those are basically the meets we cover. We cover Gulfstream in the winter, Saratoga here in the summer, and Belmont the rest of the year when they run.
But it's absolutely worth noting, too, that any of those horses that are working at those tracks, if they show up in other big races elsewhere, either at Monmouth or even sometimes if they show up at Arlington or some of the big races at Woodbine, if you have works on those horses, you will add them into the Clocker Report, usually for the big stakes on the Saturday races, right?
Yes, yeah. Last week we had reports on the races at West Virginia Derby Day at Mountaineer. We had a lot of stuff, some good reports for the Monmouth card, Haskell Day. We will have some stuff coming up here for Arlington Million Day as well. And in fact, last year Mike had an A report, I think, on the Chad Brown horse, who was put up and won the Arlington Million. Was that last year or the year before? But we had that as an extra bonus. You got an A report that won and paid $18 in the Arlington Million. As extra coverage. So it's not only New York that we cover. Well, we cover the New York workers, but when they do go out of town, we do try to add that to the daily reports when they are running.
That's great.
Okay, I got another question for you. Does the team confer before awarding an A, because they are so rare? And do you ever assign comments based on watching the video, or is this all based on what you watch live?
95% of this is based on what we watch live. When we're out of town for the Derby or the Breeders' Cup, and horses say work in California and we're not in California, if we see the video, we will comment on the works off the video, but we will always tell you when we see a video. We won't kind of pass it off as one of us was actually there. And some of those video works actually turned out to work out pretty well. For the Derby this year, or sometimes even the Gallops, but mostly on video. We're just doing the works. But we reported actually on the first of American Pharoah's first two works prior to the Belmont on the video that I saw. But then I flew there for the second work and reported on that one live, and there was no doubt in my mind after seeing that one live and in person, you could really appreciate how awesome he was by being there. And I think, we always try to be there when we can, but, like I said, our coverage is just limited because there's only two of us really. So, let's say 50% of those horses, if not more, have won their next starts off of those. But that's why they're so rare, though. We want to make sure that they actually warrant those kind of grades because they are in rarefied territory.
Great. Well, we have a few more minutes. Charlie, any further questions before we wrap for the day?
Yeah, this is a kind of a quick open-ended question. Which 2-year-old that you've seen has been most impressive to you so far this year?
Well, I think Todd's filly that won last weekend, Rachel's baby, was pretty good.
Rachel's Valentina.
Yeah, Rachel's Valentina. Like I said, we've seen her show a lot of talent in the morning, and but there was the question mark of whether she would break. You break a little slow in those 5.5 furlong races, and you could be in trouble. And that's how good she was. She was able to overcome that slow beginning and win going away. She might be the most talented of the ones that I've seen so far, just off the top of my head. I would have to, think that down the road she's going to have a pretty good future, especially the further she goes. I mean, she looks like she's the real deal.
Sure. Any unraced ones that you're maybe interested or excited about seeing debut?
Yeah. Let me just go to my book here and just make sure I get the right names for you. There's a couple that we saw over the weekend at work that Kieran McLaughlin has a horse called Markings. That's been impressive both out of the gate and then from the pole again over the weekend. Todd, interesting enough, Todd usually comes down here, dominates this meet because of his 2-year-olds. And this year he really hasn't. I think he's won more older horse races than he has 2-year-olds. His overall crop of 2-year-olds, from what we've seen in the morning, is not quite as strong as we've seen in the past. But I'm just trying to look through because he had one the other day that I was trying to see what day it was. And I want to make sure I get the right name. That Javier.
Yeah, it was interesting. Dave Grenning had an article where he wrote something along those lines where Todd felt like this maybe wasn't his strongest year for 2-year-olds, and he felt like the 2-year-old fillies were a little better than the colts.
Right. Yeah, Todd worked a team the other morning, and actually Johnny was on one and Javier was on the second one. And the one Javier was on was a horse called Hard Study. And I was really impressed with him. Now, the other horse did break a little bit slow, and he got the jump on him right away, but he increased the advantage, did it easily, galloped out extremely well. When they work from the gate here, they actually work out by the 7 furlong chute, and they finished 5 furlong works at the quarter pole. And this horse actually galloped out all the way down to the wire. And when a 2-year-old can do that at this point, I think that's pretty impressive. We've had a couple of others that have done that. I think we had one this morning that I haven't kind of identified the name yet, but I like to see that. So I think that'll be the next big one for Todd. It might be Hard Study, and I'm not sure when. He looks like he's about ready to run, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him getting be in the entries pretty soon.
Great. All right, well, that pretty much does it. We're at the top of the hour, and I just wanted to thank you, Mike, for joining, and I wanted to let everyone know that you can buy the Clocker Report. It's now discounted since we're a couple weeks into the Saratoga meet. Just go to drf.com/Clocker. You can buy the rest of the meets. You can buy weekly or daily versions of it. And hopefully everybody got some information and found it a good use of a half hour of their time, and maybe found a live horse or two for today's Pick 6 carryover. Thanks again, Mike.
My pleasure. Good luck, everybody.